Hi, Livin Guardians, Unseen Inquisitor here. So, with Season 22 a little over a month away, uh, this would mean that should everything play out like it has, and they still are doing it, we should be getting Legend Raid content next season, which is a raid we can't currently do in Destiny 2 that will be brought forward. So it's an existing raid we cannot do that will be brought forward in Destiny 205. And that's a really bad basic descriptor of it. But in any case, since King's Fall, people have been wondering what the next Legend Raid will be. So as we get closer to it, I figured why not speculate in a video here. So if you're one of the two people that stumble across this, welcome, pull up a chair, hang out, and share your thoughts on what you think the Legend Raid might be in the comment section down below and be part of a conversation. So, Legend Raiding has a particular kind of criteria that the raid team seems to be wanting to hold to. So it's kind of a set of limitations in that regard, that if they still are holding true to this, will be cool to see put forth in the next Legend Raid. And the big thing is, it's got to feel true to its core, more or less. Now, you can't design a feeling, right? Players will feel the feeling that they feel. But the idea is that each encounter needs to be true to itself. There's a source material, the original raid, right? And the Legend Raid needs to feel like, at the end of the day, with the inclusion of champions and a rework of some of the puzzles or whatever else, and an increase in spawn density of enemies and so on and so forth to make it a bit more dangerous for us in Destiny 2, where we're at now with our power. At the end of the day, even with all that, the core experience should feel like the raid of the original caliber, right? So Vault of Glass is the first Destiny raid, period. And while they did Destiny 2ify it for sure, right? They actually made the second to last encounter, whether the Gatekeeper or whatever, feel like a true encounter instead of it being a minute ordeal. And they added and tweaked pretty much every encounter, just like they did with King's Fall. But at the end of the day, it felt like Vault of Glass. You fought Atheon, and you didn't just feel like you were facing an enemy skinned as Atheon. It felt like Atheon. It felt like Templar. It felt like Oracle, and so on. So it was a true to the original experience type of remaster of a raid, right? King's Fall, same deal, right? Oryx was changed the most, I think, in that raid, thinking about it, in terms of how you deal damage to him, but the whole way to lead up to there, very true to its core. The raid feels like King's Fall. If you've never experienced either of those two raids in Destiny 1, you basically are getting the experience in Destiny 2, just a Destiny 2 version of that experience, so champions and a little bit harder than the actual original raid was, to coincide with our abilities as Guardians nowadays in terms of our builds and what we've come to expect from raids nowadays as well. So, with that criteria in mind, if we look at the different potentials out there, you can start to whittle things down. They did a fantastic job of Vault of Glass and King's Fall, so the next one they would also have to do a fantastic job with. Clearly, right? That's the hope. But in whittling things down, raids such like Scourge of the Past and Crown of Sorrow are not on the radar, I don't believe. I think that they're too new, right? They came out after Last Wish, which is still in the game. And I don't know that they would really benefit from a remastering of a raid like the Legend Raid concept. You put some champions in there, you increase in spawn density, make things a little bit harder to kill than what they were, because we can just destroy things now in the game. It just really wouldn't do much for them. They're fun raids, don't get me wrong, but it wouldn't do much for them. Now, having said that, raid layers, I think, are all off the table as well. I don't think they're going to be considered either. They are short. They're not full-fledged raids. That's why they were called raid layers. They were a concept that I don't think was scrapped. I think it evolved into dungeons, right? Looking at raid layers nowadays, looking back on them, we can't play them, but looking back on them, they felt like prototype super dungeons with a raid boss level of boss with a 6-player activity, but more akin to how dungeons operate than how raids operate nowadays. And nothing wrong with that, but I do think the way they are by design would prohibit them from being chosen for legend raid content. Even though they could benefit from an update like that, they are too short. You have to do both just to kind of justify it, and then the player base would have some words for sure. So probably not the raid layers. They were fun though. So that leaves us with just a few to think about. And one that I would love to be a top rope kind of out of nowhere, what's this, blindsiding us with a really cool legend raid is Crota's End. I just don't foresee it happening. I think Crota's End is too much in need of a more extensive reworking than what Legend Raid is trying to do, to the point where it could be unrecognizable from its original form. Now, does it need to be that far, tweaked to kind of bring in line with current Destiny 2 rating? I think the easy answer would be yeah, because then they can really do what they want with it and redesign Crota's End as a raid. But that's not for Legend rating, right? We can't change the map, we can't change the gear, we can't change the enemies, right? So, in that regard, the encounters have to stay the same. I feel like Crota's End, the style of that raid was a shot in the dark a little bit, right? In terms of, they did Vault of Glass was very cool. And they were trying for something different with Crota's End, being the second raid ever. So they went for a much more kind of action-y feel for that raid, and it works, but it does kind of, I think, keep it kind of grounded in Destiny 1 with the way it is. In fact, a lot of players nowadays who have done Crota's End, who play Destiny 2, look at it and go, that feels like it would be a better dungeon concept nowadays than a raid. But it could still get, I think if they put, their minds to it and really kind of burn the midnight oil, not literally in that sense, but just really pull out all the stops, we could have a legend raid of Crota's End that works and feels true to the original. It just would be a weird feeling for some players, even the way we actually fight Crota. And by the way, the problem for Crota's End isn't even in that it's a short-paced raid. Even in Destiny 1, we're calling it a fun strike. The problem more so is the fact that two of the encounters, or at least one of the encounters, is in the game more or less already, and the raid boss is in the game. Crota has been a nightmare Crota, in Shadowkeep and in the Nightmare Hunts, and we have Crota in the Dares of Eternity Hive boss fight where you face 3 of them. Granted, they're a lot less threatening than his raid boss form, but still, that is definitely going to water down a raid boss fight that feels exactly the same, only more dangerous. And the whole first encounter, going up to the plate in Crota's End, where you have to go from lantern to lantern to get the weight of darkness off of you in the dark, fighting a bunch of thrall, dodging death pits. If this sounds familiar, it's because the Lightblade strike has the whole Miasma Swamp section, and there you have the weight of darkness that you go from lantern to lantern to get off. It's not the exact same, but it's a whole mechanic of that encounter, more or less, is in a strike, right? So you kind of have to do a bit more with that encounter now, because it's going to not actually feel super threatening outside of the death pits, and the fact that there's a lot of hives going against you. So that kind of hurts the raid already and makes reworking it all the more important, but if you're trying to hold true to the core experience and feel, I think it makes it also difficult. Ear Youth, for example, is the second to last encounter, and you only have so much time, a couple of minutes or so to kill her, or else you wipe. Now they could deep dive it where we have that short countdown, but as we go through the different segments to get to Ear Youth, we could have some yellow bars that spawn in that increase the timer a bit, just like a deep dive. But that's really about it you can do for that encounter. So it would be a tough one, but it would be interesting to see, and I would just think it would be really cool to have that come out of nowhere. It's not that it's a super high rate on my radar necessarily, right? But I do enjoy it, and I think it's been basically counted as out by the community at large. Just to have it do this upset but be cool would be pretty fantastic, but I just doubt it. Wrath of the Machine. This is the fan favorite to be the next Legend Raid, and I wouldn't be disappointed if it was. I enjoy Siva as a concept. The aesthetics behind Siva gear from the raid is hit or miss for me. I like the cleanness of the armor, but some of it is just weird or boring. Like, I don't really like the Warlock chest armor, for example. It just looks like I'm, you know, got a bunch of like pyramids on my chest. It's not very thrilling. But I like the cleanness of it. I like some of the gear, whether it's putting a Siva node cluster and some wires on a weapon and calling it Siva is a little bit at times. I still enjoy the gear. There were some interesting gear pieces. The raid was a lot of fun. It was action-packed, but also a lot of fun. The final boss was a fantastic final boss that really needs little to no reworking at all. Honestly, it was a great capstone raid for Destiny 1 to go out on, and in terms of being fun and everything. The thing is, the raid has things working against it in the form of Siva, because Siva is not in Destiny 2 outside of Outbreak Perfected, which is a raid weapon, but in Destiny 1 it was called Outbreak Prime, and outside of some some gear, cosmetics, ornaments. It's mentioned in the lore where necessary, because it is part of the universe of Destiny, but outside of that, we don't interact or see it in the wild at all. So we have no assets in the game. Now they can import the raid over, just like they have done for King's Fall and Wall of Glass, but those two situations were not as extensive of a porting over necessarily, because the enemy assets outside of the bosses already exist in Destiny 2. Those Vex were from Curse of Osiris, more or less. That's when we've seen those Vex. Precursors and Descendants or whatever. And Hive/Taking, we've seen that in a whole bunch of different forms in Destiny 2. So those assets existed to be used as well. But in the case of Wrath of the Machine, it's not just Siva paint job on Fallen. They have unique models because they're Siva infused. They have some different capabilities like Void Shielded Captain, some different grenades, some on-death abilities, nothing crazy. I think if they were to have done this in Destiny 2, you know, for the first time, Rise of Iron, this would be the equivalent of Scorn. It would be a whole new faction, just like the Scorn are. But because it's Destiny 1, I feel it's much more limited, and they couldn't do that. So we have what we have. But it works. Some different abilities, some different shielding, and different look across the board, and different programming. They are more aggressively programmed than Standard Fallen. So all of that is not in Destiny 2. So absolutely everything, from the gear to the maps, the encounters, to the bosses, to the Siva stuff, and, you know, enemy-wise and everything, needs to be brought in. I'm not saying it's the end of the world, but that's a lot to do for just the Legend Raid, right? Like I mentioned, the enemy assets already existed with all the two Legend Raid pieces. To bring all this forward and not use it anywhere else seems like a lot of work for just one very specific thing. And I'm sure they could do it, and I'm sure it would be worth it for the player base. But considering the developers have stated that Siva is not in the cards at all to use in the story leading up to Final Shape, which may or may not still be the truth behind it. They said that in the, I forget when,
picked up that Guardian you never showed up about?
a few months ago or so, I forget exactly. But yeah, Siva has been brought up in some audio logs from the Veil and whatnot. I still think they're holding true to the fact that Siva isn't going to be utilized for the path of Final Shape. So to do a Legend Raid that it's all Siva is still fine, right? Remember, Legend Raids are points in time. They are not tied to the current story.
Do something.
They're independent of the story. But even still, if you look at, for example, Vault of Glass, it came out during Season of the Splicer, which was a Vex season, so assets got to be used more than one place. To just have it all this work go into just a bit of SIVA assets that are not going to be utilized in Destiny 2 anywhere seems like a lot of work for a Legend Raid on top of doing stuff for a season and everything else, right? I would think there'd be some spillover, at least, of asset usage and stuff like that. So unless we start seeing hints for next season and stuff, and it feels like if this show SIVA knows and stuff, then okay, Wrath of the Machine is probably the Legend Raid, but I just don't think so. Now, its raid exotic being in the game isn't a big deal. I think, I can recall, I can't remember 100% and I can't find the article, but I think they stated that if the raid exotic already exists in the game, they would make a new one, which is cool and fits with another raid. Well, it fits with 4 total, but I already went over 3 of them. So the last one I want to bring up is Leviathan. This is my personal choice and thought of what's going to be the next Legend Raid. I could be completely wrong, but it's the first raid of Destiny 2. It's another unique raid concept. It's kind of like a hub raid, right? You load in, you run to the Castellum, you do the Castellum mini encounter, it opens the door to the first encounter, you finish the first encounter, you go back to the Castellum, do the same thing, opens the door to the second encounter, and so on. This is different from any other raid. There's also the Underbelly, which you can bypass the Castellum completely all the time through the Underbelly. Even from the beginning of the raid through to post every encounter, basically. And that's really cool. The Underbelly has chests that we get keys for to unlock, and you can even go into it solo and kind of patrol the raid, which is pretty cool. There's no beacons or anything, but hey, still very cool. All that would have to be brought forward in Legend Raiding as well. You know, the Underbelly and everything. But the Leviathan exists in the game. The assets are in the game, right? Everything for Leviathan is in Destiny 2. It's just vaulted, right? So it's all here already. They just need to add some champions. That's something they do now in raids, right? They need to maybe up the spawn density, up the lethality, make things a little bit harder to kill, because we would absolutely burn through things in that raid if it wasn't made harder to kill. And maybe rework some of the encounters a bit. You know, nothing crazy, just a little bit of a rework, right? And you have yourself a very cool Legend Raid. Plus, it kind of fits the undertone of the theming of what's going down, right? Beyond Light is when we got Vault of Glass. Beyond Light, on top of all of the stasis stuff and Aramis's house and all that jazz, we have Clovis Bray as an undertone and his research. And you see a lot of Vex research with exo creation and Vex experimentation in general, right? Season of Splicer was a Vex season, we got Vault of Glass. Witch Queen. It doesn't matter the season, right? Witch Queen, Taken King, they are siblings. It just writes itself. It was a no-brainer that was going to be the Legend Raid. Well, with Lightfall, we concluded, for now anyways, we don't know what might happen in the future, but for now we concluded our saga with Callus that we've had ongoing for years. The Menagerie and Crown of Sorrow and the Glykon and everything else, and the nightmares aboard the Leviathan when it came back and it's still around the moon, right? And all of that came to a head in Lightfall, and it all began with the Leviathan raid. So I think it's almost poetic, right? If you've never got to experience the Leviathan raid, well now you will, if it is the Legend raid, and you get to see where it all started with Callus, more or less. Plus the gear's pretty cool too. So, and you know, outside of that, presuming the Castellum, you know, works the way it always has, it's also a pretty good enemy killing area for farming weapon XP. But anyways, with that said, that's just my thoughts on what I think the next Legend Raid will be. Will definitely not be disappointed if it's Wrath of the Machine. I do enjoy the whole SIVA concept, and it would be cool to see it in Destiny 2. It's just a lot of work for just a Legend Raid, unless next season somehow incorporates SIVA, but I highly doubt it. And definitely would not be mad either at a Crota's End rework. It just seems like too much has to be changed, and it might change the fundamental experience of what Crota's End was all about, which is what they're not trying to do with Legend Raiding. So that's why my choice, my thought anyway, my guess is that I think it'll be Leviathan, which is a lot of fun. I enjoy that location. It's pretty unique looking still, and just a fun place to go and a fun raid to do. So, with all that said, what do you think? What is your choice? What is your guess at the next Legend Raid? Do you think it's Wrath of the Machine or Leviathan, or are you on the Crota's End camp? Whatever the case is, share it all in the comment section down below. Thanks so much for tuning in and stopping by. A little bit of a long one. If you made it this far, consider subscribing to be part of future conversations more easily, like this and other conversations. And also, comment Siva so I know you made it to the end. And until next time, Guardians, stay frosty.